ain't going back, not gonna buy into all that. Hey, hey, ain't gonna hide, gonna let all the fears slide. Got Mother Nature is on my side, got all of the loving.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the New Now. I'm Lorenzo from the New Agora, newagora.ca. I'm with Kingsley Dennis today. I just want to give everyone a quick reminder. We've been in print and publishing for 11, 12 years. Kingsley has been with us, even if he may not have known over the course of that time period. We've been sharing his articles and plenty more besides. And the reason I'm mentioning it is go to newagora.ca and to Kingsley Dennis's website. You'll find tons of good information, tons of good stuff, tons of good products and services and intelligent ways that we find that you can be alive if you so choose to do some of those actions. Hello, Kingsley. Welcome to our show.
Hi, Lorenzo. Thanks for the invitation, and thank you for sharing my work over the years, which I wasn't aware of, but cheers.
No, we appreciate it. We've given you links and credits and all of those things. And today we're going to discuss a huge topic, at least do one part, maybe more, it depends on where this goes. Freedom, truth, and illusion. Let's say we tackle what you feel is a good definition of freedom.
Well, a big question, and really, freedom, I would say, is awareness of our human nature, because freedom, I think, is something we've always assumed we've had, and it's only when it's taken away from you or is restrained then we realize that we were never really free to begin with, or freedom was an illusion that we had it. Because so I think freedom has to be awareness of who we are and what are our rights and of our human nature. And as I said, you don't realize you're in a prison until you see the prison bars. So, I think it's something we take for granted. And only in the last few years, when all the facade of this so-called freedom, just because you can jump on a plane and go on holiday, you think you're free. We thought we were free to say what we want until we realized in the last couple of years that censorship is actually monitored and surveyed and managed. So I think freedom is being beyond those constraints of external management. We are responsible for how we manage ourselves. And I think that's freedom, is that liberty to manage yourself.
Well, you mentioned human potential and, human nature. What would you say that would be? Because that's an interesting topic all on its own, human nature.
Well, I think even now, the question of what it means to be human, again, is coming to the fore because all these other external influences are coming in. And perhaps we're taking for granted what human nature means. And perhaps we don't realize that being human means that we have potential to keep on changing, keep on developing, keep on becoming. I often say that a human being is a human becoming. We're not a finished project yet, and it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to try and experiment in different ways because we're still learning what it means to move forward. And that's human nature, is to develop, try to understand how we develop in different ways. And again, if that potential to move forward is curtailed or restrained, or being managed to go in a certain direction, and then again we get in the whole topic of transhumanism, we realize that human nature is trying to be managed by external forces, whereas human nature should be an unfolding from internal potentials, latent potentials, because the human being has so many what we may call latent organs of perception, organs of cognition, of knowledge, of understanding. But if those latent organs don't get a chance to develop, unfold, expand, grow because of external constraints and management, then again, we have an artificial environment for human nature. So it's a larger topic, but that's in a nutshell, I would say.
Well, that's a great topic. Now, may I ask you what you believe those external influences are? That's another.
All these questions could be a show in itself.
Yes.
I think we're realizing now that human life comes under a kind of form of social management. And we've all known that from sociologists, and if you just look at society, we know that society has been managed. And generally, we've accepted that because we've been told or conditioned or programmed that we need a certain management to keep everything in order and coherent. So we need social laws and norms. You can't run amok and do everything. So we understand that society has some rules or norms or understandings. And we always kind of thought, well, that's okay, but it stops there. We didn't really understand that there's levels and levels of all these management. So we thought it was a kind of mini macro management, not meta macro management. Now we're becoming to understand that there are forms of social management which are on huge levels, on your community level, your national level, and even, to some extent, global level, of course. So, we're realizing that, we are like the Russian doll analogy. You have a doll nested within a doll, within a doll, within a doll. We're realizing that there's layers and layers and layers. And the more we take them away, the more we realize that, we have, again, all these forms trying to managers, and influencers. And of course, now we understand through technology that these forms of external influences are very, very interpenetrating. Not just propaganda from a billboard on the road or from your radio or TV advertising, but these subliminals in everywhere we go, and how they subtly kind of nudge your thinking patterns to steer you in a direction of thought. And now what we have is kind of digital nudging. And I'd recommend anybody to look up surveillance capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff, the professor. Surveillance capitalism realized that there's a digital nudging whereby all our movements online are being monitored, and then we get influences to nudge us to go in a certain direction, to visit certain sites, and to believe and think in a certain way, because we believe that the internet is another space of freedom. We don't realize that actually 50% of the content and more is created by bots and algorithms that are trying to influence how we think and our opinions and our mindsets by putting in information that is customized within our technological bubble. So, there's all these levels of meta, macro, micro management through external behaviors and through interpenetration on the way we think and our thought patterns. So it's really huge, Lorenzo.
It is. But let's say why? Why do you think they're going through or to such efforts to manage us literally from cradle to grave?
Because I would say the one wild card is humanity, human nature. It's a wild card because no matter how much that anybody would want to predict it, they can't. And also because we are the greatest window of opportunity for potential is through the human being, because we have those latent potentials, as I mentioned. So, of course, if you are trying to manage, let's say, the human population, because we are let's say, more or less the dominant self-conscious sentient species on the planet. There are other sentient species, but through self-consciousness, the way we manifest it, humanity are the dominant ones of how we put our self-consciousness forward on the planet. So we're being managed in order to, let's say, have control over the planet. Now, in times past, the management could be done in a kind of external physical way. If you scare people physically, or you have sovereignty over their body physically, you have control over them. So we know that when the so-called the kings and queens or monarchs or the republics were in power, they had control over us physically. So they'd say if you did anything wrong, they'd make you a public humiliation. They'd put you in the town square into stocks or hang you and have your hanging body as a warning for everybody else. And the word got around, you see. But they couldn't get into our minds. But way back in the past, that wasn't so important because we were we weren't so developed consciously in how we manifested our thoughts and our sense of self, let's say. Over time, of course, we've come to a point where we're much more sophisticated, we're much more in-depth in our thought patterns, our understanding, our expression of consciousness. So, of course, if they can manage us physically, they can put someone in prison for all their life, but they may not change their thinking patterns, you know? And there's been a case in point where people have been in prison for decades and they come out and they're still an icon or a martyr, you know? So, you know, the pinnacle, I suppose, of wanting to have control over the systems on the planet or control of in general, of the planet and how we operate on it, is to get into our minds. It's the kind of the holy grail of you know, controlling human nature. And that's why through technologies, they can now interpenetrate more and more through first conditioning, external conditioning and programming, and now through more technological means, as we've just kind of slightly touched upon, to try to steer and nudge our thinking patterns, our opinions, etc., because they know, you know, that's the last bastion, is to get inside our minds, our psyche, and to affect our consciousness. And so they're doing that now because we are, as I said, we are the wild card. And you're seeing across the planet now that, you know, these major governments are realizing that they have to tread carefully because there are protests, there are people rising up, and no matter how heavy the programming is, and it's very heavy right now, they still can't get to everybody. And you only need a portion of society to be a catalyst to spread a contagion in consciousness, because consciousness, ideas, and understanding is a contagion as much as any virus is. Of
course.
And maybe faster, because it spreads through thought waves. So it's social management on a total exclusive and inclusive way. But I think they fear human nature because they know that they can't ultimately control it or predict it, and they don't know which way we're going to turn. And that's to our advantage. We are incredibly creative and resourceful humans.
Well, let's say this. You've become hardened to the penetration effects of propaganda, right? You know, it doesn't work on you, you know, let's say. So what makes you different from the regular, you know, 90% of the people that are zombified and moving down the streets believing most of what they hear and are told?
Well, I mean, I'd like to say that I'm fairly resistant against propaganda. I would never say 100% because that leaves you open to complacency. I don't think anyone's 100%. And I try not to put myself any different from other people. Means whatever stage I've arrived at my understanding is possible for anybody. But you're right, you know, I want to say that this is a kind of egalitarian opportunity where we can all come to you know, our level of understanding. At the same time, though, there are a lot of zombies out there. So we have to recognize that as well, which is good because it gives it an opportunity of discernment to say that's a behavior which, you know, is a result of being unaware to certain propaganda. And if I can recognize that, at least I can kind of make a discernment to my own behavior. And I think what it is, the state that I've arrived at is just many, many years of trying to decondition myself, is to peeling off the layers of conditioning. Now, many people say that if you want to, you know, if you want to develop yourself or develop your understanding, you do this and you do that, and there's all these steps, and there's many traditions or pathways or religious, spiritual pathways, etc. I came to the understanding, I think in my early 20s, that if you jump on a pathway of, let's say, development or something, and if you put all these steps on top of where you are, if your foundation is fundamentally corrupt, i.e., you still are heavy with the propaganda and conditioning, anything you put on top of you is built on a faulty foundation. I think, as the parable says, you know, you build your house on sand, at one point it's going to collapse, no matter if it's a luxurious, you know, penthouse, it's going to collapse if your foundation is not good. So I made a point of trying to start by going back to the basics, by deconditioning as much as possible myself, looking at what is conditioning me, what are the programs out there, what are these social cultural influences, why do I think the way I do at a young age? Because we can say like, I believe in this thoroughly. Okay, this is my belief system, and it's my sovereign belief system that I've come to it through my own understanding. Okay, but if you were born in a different part of the world under a different political or religious environment, would you think the same then? Probably not. You see, so we automatically say, I have this sovereign belief system, but we need to look at why do we have those beliefs? Where do they come from? And are they attached to our personality and our culture and our environment, or are they part of our essential self? So if we can get to what's our more essential and strip away what's part of the personality, we have a better start in life, or a better foundation. So that's what I did to try to arrive to where I am now.
Was there a catalyst moment or three that woke you to this perspective of exploration of your inner world?
Well, I wouldn't say there's one catalyst moment. I think when I was in my youth, let's say around 18, 19, 20, I came across the work of Gurdjieff. And you may be aware of that, and some of your listeners perhaps as well. And I think that helped me a lot because, Gurdjieff, I've looked at other stuff when I was younger, as you often do. But when I came across Gurdjieff, it was like, boom, this stuff was really, really for me fresh, and really kind of stripped things down by saying, you are asleep, humankind is asleep, you've got all these different personalities and eyes, you are operating automatically. So I thought, well, actually, he's got a point. So, if he's got a point, then what do I do about it? So that was, I suppose, when I was 18, 19, was the first probably big blow, because a lot of material that we come to, especially what we may call inner development material, it can be very kind of, soft and cushy and, kind of, rocks you in a boat like a baby. And but really, we need the shocks. It's the shocks that help us rather than the cushy stuff. And I think also that's the same with external life circumstances, which is happening now in the world. Often we need the shocks to be of real benefit. And they may seem a little uncomfortable at the time, but they actually perhaps can benefit more than kind of, soft handling, pussyfooting around.
For sure. So, we discussed at the beginning, we're going to look at truths and illusions. Let's say, how would you separate? Because truth is a very tricky, interesting slope. And for me, it's changed from, as you say, from 18 to 28 to 38 to 48. Things have, my truths have altered as I have, as my perspectives have changed on life and my experiences. What would you say perhaps has weighed on one side or the other for truths and illusions? Like how would you define them, if at all?
Well, I would say that first we have to get a grasp on what we understand about our reality, because reality is like the framework where we have these understandings of truth and illusion. And I came to the way I frame it, and again, it's very careful. We have to use language carefully and definitions because they frame our cognitive models. So I come to see this reality we are in as a lesser reality. And that's why, the recent collection of essays I put out are called Notes from a Lesser Reality. So if we that means actually there's a greater reality, which is good. It's good news that there's a greater reality, but it exists beyond our perceptive realm at this moment. We are in the lesser reality. So the truths we're dealing with are lesser truths. They can still be important for us, and they can still be truths for us, but they are not with a capital T as in objective, let's say universal truth so much, but they're truths for our reality. So if you can see they're lesser truths, there's a quote I remember, I think it's from Idris Shah. He said, the world is an illusion, but there are still truths within it. And I think that's a good way to frame it, because there's still interventions of truth, but there may be in this reality lesser truths reflecting greater truths. So illusion really is more or less the facade of this reality. But of course, it's because it's not the greater truth, it's an illusion. But it reflects that there is a greater cognition, a greater perceptive understanding. And so really, this reality is a gradation of different levels of illusions. And some of those illusions are closer to the truth and some are further away. So let's make the analogy of a theater. You're watching a play and you have the front end of the stage where the actors come on and they do their theater. And then you get some actors maybe at the back end of the stage, and they are maybe lesser actors or something. And then you get the curtain, and then you get all the activity behind the curtain. And you get these people who are responsible for putting the play on, all the stage hands and everyone who are operating the lighting. They're important because they create the structure for the theater. But the front end of the theater is what we immediately see. The spectacle, the facade, what I call the theater of the absurd. And we get all this facade in life, entertainment, media, spectacle. And we don't realize that you get different parts of the stage, front stage, backstage, then you get behind the curtain. All these are, for me, levels of illusion. And so reality is really, the lesser reality is a presentation of different states of illusion. Some are closer to truth and some are further away. And the ones that are further away are the ones that are manufactured by our social cultural systems and our institutions. Like I say, the media, the politics, and all the major institutions, they propagate these greater illusions. And the more that we can penetrate through, let's say, an inner discernment or inner awareness, I would say we get to a gradation where the illusion is less dense and it's closer to truth to us. So I don't know if that answers the question. There are gradations in everything.
Well, how would you describe the greater reality?
Well, the greater reality is what's beyond what may adhere to, let's say, cosmic laws. What may be the origin for materiality? Because we are living, again, it's all a matter of perspective. When someone says it's a matter of perspective, that can cover everything from left field to right field. So when I say that, I mean, if you think, if your perspective, and this is the dominant, let's say, dominant consensus narrative, is that life is generally an accident that occurred on this planet. Some kind of DNA brought out of these sulfur pools on a dead rock that's hurtling through empty space, and we're an accident, and there's no kind of reason for life, and there's perhaps no life in the universe, and when you're dead, you're dead. That's the consensus narrative, and I think most thinking people have realized that that's poppycock, to put it blindly or put it diplomatically. Actually, I haven't used that word for years. I don't know why I said poppycock. Just occurred to me, but anyway, it's rubbish. And so we know that there is much deeper understandings to why there is life, and physicality, materiality, in my perception and perspective, is a secondary manifestation. And it's a secondary manifestation because the primary manifestation is energy or consciousness, conscious energy. And from that, we produce matter. Now, that's easier to understand because we know in our Science 101 science classes that we have atoms. Inside atoms, we have protons, electrons, neutrons. Inside those, we have quarks. Go down enough all the way, and there's nothing. It's just energy. So we understand that, but we don't apply that knowledge. It's just back of our heads, because science has always been very difficult to apply. So if we understand that physical reality is secondary, consciousness is not a secondary phenomenon. That people, the consensus narrative again is consciousness is a byproduct of the brain's complexity. We have so many neurons going connecting our brains, poof, we have consciousness. But if we understand that consciousness is primary and that infuses materiality, then we realize that understanding of prior to materiality is part of the greater reality. And therefore, living through matter is part of the lesser reality, let's say.
I would agree. Now, a question kind of a bit from left field that's come up. Have you yourself experienced or studied any of the so-called Mandela effects, of what's been going on in relation to what you mentioned about consciousness and, energy being first and the physical world being second?
I don't think I've not consciously experienced a Mandela effect. And it's interesting because that phenomenon is quite recent as well. And if people are being picked up on it recently, and it is a phenomenon that occurs in these physical laws of our reality, then it must have occurred before. And if it occurred before, why wasn't it spotted? If it occurred just recently, is it because of certain developments in technology? So when something just comes out of the blue, it always makes me question, why now? So no, I'm not actually, I do feel that there is a lot to say about potential timelines or manipulations of timelines, but I've not personally had a moment where I thought that's a Mandela effect. But I can't deny the effect, or other effects such as manipulations or fluctuations in reality or time, and there are moments where, and this is another thing, is that all these things affect and they are playing with human memory, and this is a very important part of our reality experience, is memory, because really the human species is a species in amnesia. Because when we are born, incarnated into into a human form, we come with no memory of anything prior. Now, there are, of course, people coming forward and saying, well, I have memory of prior lives or pre-incarnation. And again, a fairly recent phenomenon, although there's been indications in several hundred years ago of these phenomena. So the question is, why do we come with no memory? Is it because we need to understand our life experience without memory? Because if we came with memory, maybe that would corrupt our pathway of understanding or interfere with it. And if we don't come with memory, but there are those people or those players that know we don't come with a memory, they can manipulate us even more and play with our sense of memory. So, and there's been there's been a line of philosophy, such as from Plato and the Greeks and elsewhere. They're saying that in life, it's not to particularly learn something from scratch, but to remember again. Life is about remembrance. Plato said, I think, that the Greek myth, before you incarnate, you drink from the river of Lethe, which means you forget your memory, and then you have to go through processes to remember a part of who you really are in this lifetime. So if that's the case, I think there's a lot of interplay about memory. Is memory true? Is memory false? Especially now with technologies, there's a lot of memes around implanting false memories, about false truths with the internet and deep fakes. So there's a lot of interplay about memory as well that plays into this, and perhaps the Mandela effect is a whole part of this phenomenon.
It's very interesting because I know I've had one or two experiences that have hit me where, like, I've had conversations with people about certain things, such as, let's say, the Volkswagen logo. I remember it touching. Like, I very distinctly recall having a conversation with a friend of mine going, what is that? Because, it seemed like one whole image, the V and the W for the Volkswagen. And now it's separate, right? Because at the time he said, oh, you have to separate them. So I distinctly have this memory And then now, obviously, the Volkswagen logo is separate, like the V and the W don't touch. So it's very interesting to,
Mhm.
to sit back and to try and, see these little glitches. And it could be my memory, it could be in reality,
Mhm.
it could be in, any number of things. It could be in technology, as you say, it could be in my cognitive function. It doesn't really matter to me. It's just allowed me to see that there's, that if my memory could be faulty, let's say, or my past could change,
Mhm.
it allows my perspective for the future to be more malleable, which as I found is beautiful to allow for potential to grow.
Yeah. And on that theme, and we're talking about, there's a lot more conversations around the manipulation of time and timelines.
Mm.
That wasn't around like a few decades ago. And there's even people talking about, time travelers, for example, who come. I mean, only recently I came across it, just in fact this week,
Really?
of the story of, I think, John Titor. His name is John Titor.
I
Have you
have.
heard of this story?
I
Yeah.
have.
And I wasn't aware of that. And the idea that this person was saying, I think from 2036, they were saying, we are in, we've come back to your timeline and we have to be careful and we see these elements. Well, and there's all the different talks of technologies of time seeing and time travel. Of course, if there's a slight interference in one timeline, then of course there's this glitch you talk about of things being put together, but they nearly match, but there's a slight discrepancy in how you remember it. So again, perhaps now we're coming to a stage of much more advanced technology. We're having the technologies of time open up to us and being a part of our comprehension, whereby decades ago, a time traveler was something like H.G. Wells. You got into a big hot tub and, went back in a different place. But time travel is a lot more subtle and a lot more nuanced. So I think that we're having these conversations now because we're more prepared to wrap our heads around.
Well, as a scientist, if you consider, and I want to ask you, like, now is all there is, really, right? Now is now. And, and we talked about memory. So the past is obviously memory because it's not here, and the future could only be a perspective on memory, I'm guessing, because you're kind of guessing what your future is going to be, but you're using your memory to do so, right? Because if you don't have new information yet, you can't use it. So what would you say in relation to, now being the only moment and the Mandela effect and some of this manipulation you've talked about from, those players and who they might be, those players that maybe understand this at a deep level?
Mm-hmm. Well, from a purely normal human level, let's say us talking now and that, I feel that we need the now to ground us. And that's where we perhaps can get closest to our essence, or the human essence, is when we're grounded. And that's part of the danger in going into often all these ideas and theories, is that they're fine to do so, but I would say, ground yourself first. There's an old Eastern Arabic phrase which says, trust in God, but tie your camel first. Which means that there's all these other religious or spiritual or otherworldly pathways, but take care of your practical things first, And I think we have to be grounded and be balanced before we go hopping off into all these explorations, because that will always serve us better. Going back to what I said before, get your foundation right, your adventure will be much more long term. So, and also the present, yes, getting close to the getting close to the essence, being more grounded. And the idea of time and space, I think we have to realize that this may only apply to our understanding of the universe. And when you get scientists looking out telescopes to the universe, and this is the thing which always puzzled me from a young kid. I remember being something like 15 years old, and I had my first telescope. I was looking at the stars, and I thought, well, how do I know the stars out there are real? Because the telescope is being made by humans to align with the human eye, therefore the human perception. So basically, the tool is aligned with us. So anything the tool sees is going to be biased for our perceptive capacities.
100%.
And so I've carried that thought with me, because of course the spectrum, the range of human perception in the spectrum is minuscule. Something like 0.001% of the visible light spectrum we can see, you know. And thanks to the telescopes, we can see more kind of infrared, and we've got more a wider spectrum. But of course, we've created that spectrum according to our understanding of what visible light is and what's seeable. So the laws of time and space, for me, I would say, you know, let's just put it to our perception of the universe. If, you know, the multiple universes, they may have a totally different other time and space continuum, but we don't know that. So let's stay with that. So time, past, present, and future, for me, is a human phenomenon, because that's how we've perceived it. And according to, you know, and when, of course, according to many experiences of people who have gone beyond the body, or beyond our, let's say, physical containment, they say there is no time. So if there is no time, everything is now. So again, if we want to get back to the essential, best to stay with the now, because that's the one concrete thing which we have. The now or eternity, more or less, it's the same moment.
So how would you ground yourself in the now, in your opinion? You said best to ground yourself to move out from. What would you suggest are some good actions related to that?
Well, that, I mean, for me, is like grounding my sense of self, and being trying to have a kind of a sense of your, let's say, home resonance or home vibration or home calling, you know. So wherever you go, it's like you get a sense of where your home is, where you're at. So, you know, just for example, they say in the near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences, when you leave your body, you have your silver cord that keeps you to your body. You know, there's something that can, it's like a homing call. So, you know, maybe if you're meditating, or if you're in a kind of half awake zone, you know, you're listening to yourself. You kind of have a sense of when you're talking to your deepest self. There's a kind of tone of voice. There's a sense of your own frequency. I refer to it as a, you know, frequency signature that everybody has their own. And if you can understand that, I'm not saying you can pin it down. I'm not saying you can hum it, you know, or play it on a piano, but there's a sense of self that a person comes more familiar with over time, the more that they, let's say, work on themselves or be with themselves or listen to themselves. And if you can always keep an attachment to that kind of home frequency, then that for me is a grounding. And so when you go off, and you can kind of, I think you're able to measure things against your own sense of self a bit more. You know, Timothy Leary used to say in a more external way, you know, everybody needs their inbuilt bullshit detector.
For sure. Well, yeah, Kingsley, why do you do the work you do out of curiosity? Like the books you write, you know, some of the essays you've shared. It seems to me it's a full-time effort on your part, you know, your vocation, so to speak. Why did you choose that, and why are you sharing the kinds of information you're sharing?
I didn't know I had a choice. Really, I fell into it. It always felt natural to me. I was always, as a young man, or even as a teenager, looking for these answers, trying to find out what's going on. The world never felt completely right for me. There was something going on, something behind it. And I just feel that it's only my responsibility that anything I come across, I should share it, you know. What am I going to do with it on my own? There's that old, reminds me of that joke where a priest after giving a sermon on Sunday, he sneaks out of church and he goes to the golf course, and the angels are looking down and they're saying, "My God, on a Sunday he's playing golf. He shouldn't be doing that." And God, come over there. So God comes over and he sees the priest playing golf. The angel says, "You got to do something, you know." So God says, "Watch this." And the priest puts the golf ball down, he hits it, and woof, it goes all the way over the golf course and straight into the goal, hole in one. And the angel says, "But you're supposed to be punishing him. You gave him a hole in one." And God said, "Yeah, it's Sunday. Who can he tell?" You know, if you keep it all to yourself, it's not good. So I think in a way it's just it's just a way of, I think transmission is what humans do. And yeah.
Well, I see, you've got New Dawn magazine to your right there over your shoulder. I believe that's New Dawn magazine, poking out. And
Well spotted. It is,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I know you've shared some information there. I mean, have you had any personal, let's say metaphysical out of body dream, interesting experiences that have helped or hindered you on your path in relation to what we've shared so far?
No, I haven't. I've never had a kind of any of these major metaphysical, let's say, experiences. There are people who have had out of body experiences, or people talk of lots of different things, or maybe some people talk about Kundalini things, or visions and this. And no, I haven't. And so all I have is a kind of intuitive sense. So I haven't had an experience I can say this gave me this, or I've got a personal experiential moment where I went out of the body and I can say this is this. My life hasn't been like that. And also I've had to work at getting my understanding and intuitions. I've had to work over the last 30 years of getting to the stage where I am. I'm not saying my understandings are wow, but what I understand now, I worked at to arrive at, and I feel that's probably part of what was grounding me. And I have thought about it, and I look back and I thought, actually, I'm thankful for that, because if I had some wow moment when I was 20, it probably would have set me on a whole different path. Maybe I would have gone down the fame route, or some other route, and I would have been less grounded. So I do feel that perhaps everybody gets what is right for them in their own way. Mine has been a very slow, gradual unfolding, and I suppose whatever I get, I just intuit it, but no great wow kind of that happened then and that happened then. No.
Because you mentioned Timothy Leary, have you ever had those kind of experiences? I mean, even in your younger years, some of the so-called power plants or enhanced, I don't want to mean to put you on the spot. I mean, I've gone through all kinds of experiences myself and seen all kinds of things. So I'm just wondering if you've had any influences of that nature that have, allowed you a wider understanding, let's say, of the energy and reality behind the scenes, the greater reality, as you say.
Only in a slight degree. I mean, yes, in younger days, I think like everybody, I experimented a little bit. Nothing hard, but experimented with some magical kind of substances. And yes, I read Timothy Leary, interested in that. I mean, I actually did things like I tried to do sensory deprivation experiments. I took some magic mushrooms or some LSD, and I went into a dark room, or I even blindfolded myself and went into sensory deprivation. I was never a person who went into a social environment. I didn't want to do that because I realized straight away that too much sensory input would corrupt your experience.
For sure.
And so anything that I experimented with, it was mostly alone and in a closed, mostly controlled environment. That way I went inwards rather than outwards. So I didn't have any major epiphanies either. I didn't take any, let's say, any plant. I haven't been to South America or done any plant-based ayahuasca type things either. So I haven't done that. I haven't done anything hard, just, one or two magic-y stuff. But what I did realize is that pathway is a temporary pathway.
Definitely.
Because yes, it does open you up to understanding that there are different levels of perceptive expansion and awareness, and you get there, and you're there for a short time, and then boom, you're back again. And of course, that's the thing. Many people want to go back and repeat it. Well, I thought, well, if I want to expand my perception and my consciousness, I want to do it long-term and permanent-wise. How do I do that? And that's what put me on the long trek to understanding, developing, researching, because I wanted to understand these worlds, let's say, from a permanent or intuitive perspective, not from a flash in the pan trip.
Makes sense. Let's for those of our viewers that haven't like studied Gurdjieff, how would you put maybe in a shorter perspective his studies and what he shared and how that influenced you?
Well, Gurdjieff always said that he took the wisdom of the East and put it with the science of the West. So for me, he came at the kind of crossroads where the West was receiving a lot of wisdom or teachings from the East. Of course, the East we associate with the yogis and with that type of Indian guru or ashram type of path. And then obviously the West, we have Western occultism, Hermeticism, and science. So they're two different, pathways. And what Gurdjieff said was he went through many travels into the East and that area and took understanding of human nature. But of course, he understood that the Western world, which was his transmission area, was the Western world, that we were coming to an era of, let's say, more psychologically based. Science psychology. So his remit, according to his words, or his mandate, was to take this wisdom from an Eastern source, an Eastern lineage, but then to project it and transmit it through forms which were amenable to a Western mindset. So that's why he talked about the science of human nature, the science of our cognition, our intellect, our emotions, our movement center, ideas of, that's why he said that the human is a machine, an automaton, because we understood those terms, and even more so now is more relevant. And the science of how we take our food, we take our impressions from the external world, and the impressions we take are part of the food for our inner development. And so we should be careful about what impressions we take. All information which, when he put it out in the 1920s, was completely new, but I think really was even more relevant for the time now. And like any kind of major teaching operation, you put something out which really hits the time, but it's for a long longevity and perhaps comes into more fruition down the line. So I would say that he's really coming to fruition now, understanding the automatic mechanical nature. And as Gurdjieff said, there's two things we should look at, that there's consciousness and there's mechanicalness, automation. And these two pathways are struggling. The human being is struggling to be conscious against these overwhelming forces of mechanicalness. And I think, in 1920s, people were going, wow, yeah. And trying to figure it out. But I think now we're really seeing how that's coming to the fore.
Well, looking into even this short conversation we've had, how would you tie that into, your own explorations of seeing energies first, which I found as well, consciousness, and then I guess by its very definition, if you were looking at it logically, the mechanical would be second. Right. So how would you tie that into it? Do you think you would alter perhaps some of Gurdjieff's understandings in that, man is struggling, are we struggling mechanically or are we struggling consciously in the modern age that will, what's a better focus to enhance our freedom, we'll say, to enhance, your life's path? Let's challenge it a little bit.
Yeah, well, when Gurdjieff was speaking, I think we will understand those two, let's say, framework of mechanicalness and consciousness perhaps was taken as being a struggle internally, and they were and they are. We are very much, we react automatically, we operate perhaps on a lower level of conscious awareness. But I think what's changed with Gurdjieff's framing and the whole sense of life on Earth now, coming closer to where humanity can take an evolutionary decision of where it wants to go. Because human nature hasn't been changed for a long time. And this is how evolution works. It goes through long, long periods of a more or less stability, and then you go through a kind of an evolutionary bifurcation, a jump, a spurt, and that's how evolution works. It works like that, and boom. And there's windows of opportunity, biologically and cosmically and all ways, where you get a greater moment of acceleration. So I would take Gurdjieff's framework and put it not just an internal struggle, but an external struggle relating to what will be the evolutionary trajectory for our species in the future. Because we can and we are being steered towards an external mechanicalness, where we are being told that the next stage is to combine the human being with a technology, a cyborgian transhumanist future. So the mechanicalness is not just a theory of internal struggle. It's actually becoming an external reality where we will become more mechanical. And it's happening now, because so much of our lifetimes, so much of our life is ordained and managed through algorithms and smart software. We can't get on a plane without it being managed by software. We can't drive down the road without software saying, like, you can drive here, you can't drive there. You got to pay to go into this area. You got to pay for low emission. Got to pay for your car emissions in this area. We have our credit scores. We have our social ratings. All this is a mechanicalness, but it's coming externally to try to put us into a certain framework. So I think now we're dealing with a kind of an expansion of Gurdjieff's forces, not just internal struggle, but external forces, which will have a large role in deciding which pathway humanity goes down in the future. Will it be more the consciousness framework, whereby, as I said, the human being is a human becoming? We haven't finished our potentials yet. We've still got more to go. Will we be allowed to unfold those human potentials? Or there's the transhumanist agenda is trying to pass the baton on the relay race too quickly, trying to pass it on to the next runner, which is the transhumanist form of the human being. And I think looking at that puts this consciousness mechanical framework in a whole bigger ballpark.
Yeah, but who would be, do you feel, directing? I mean, there seems to me that there is, an ultimate pull, let's say, because I didn't wake up one day and say, wow, wouldn't it be great to put computer chips in my brain, or to pay for my breakfast cereal with a digital implant up my nose or something. It's like this is obviously, it seems to me, being pushed from somewhere, from the outside towards our consciousness, or into our physical reality from our conscious level, as you say. Have you done any studies of those sorts of origins?
Well, I did talk about this on one of the essays about the terraforming of the planet.
Right.
And do we have a time limit here?
We do. No, go. No time limit.
All right. Well, what I spoke about is terraforming, and I'm sure you're familiar with the word, but just to kind of explain it, terraforming is when you go to an environment which may be kind of undeveloped or lesser developed, and you want to change it, you form it into an environment which is more amenable to what you want to be the dominant life force.
Right.
So, for example, if humans go to another planet in the solar system, and they want to change the atmosphere, change it to be amenable to dominant life force, which would be humans. Okay, and what I'm saying is that if you look around you, or if any kind of non-terrestrial, non-Earth species came to visit the Earth, looked down and saw what was going on, they would think the dominant life form was a technological life form, an algorithm or a software, and that humans were the secondary life form or a lesser life form, because humans are moving through a technological environment, and it's being terraformed more and more, as we've been talking about. We now exist within a digital electronic ecosystem, and it's operating through. We know that our environment is now hundreds and hundreds of times more electromagnetically charged than it ever was. We're moving through all these wireless waves. We know that all these digital infrastructures are managing our lives. And so it seems as if the planet is being morphed or terraformed to be more amenable to a technological life form. Now, who's in charge of that? Of course, we humans, tend to like, there's a part of humans who say, I'm just going to go with the flow, we have the technology, I'm just going to help it along. And there's always a certain degree of that type of, I suppose, easygoing, not being too aware type of human behavior.
It's a polite way of putting it.
Yeah, there's always been a bit of stupidity in anything we humans do. But it does make you wonder that is there a specific agenda between the unfolding of this environment? Because if this, if you take this as a kind of thought experiment and we take this terraform planet in 10 years, think how much more digitally managed, and everything will be through algorithms, the internet will be most 80% of our finances are done through flash trading and algorithms and digital management. It's most traders will tell you they don't understand how the trading happens. The machines are doing it. And we know also that through deep learning, these chatbots are going now, they are reprogramming themselves. And they're probably learning about us by downloading this interview we're having now, because they've been fed to the limit of their ability of information. And the developers are talking about this. They said, we have no more data to feed them, so we just let them go loose on the internet to download all the podcasts, all the videos, because that's live, updated information. So they're getting all this. And so they're kind of deep learning ahead beyond the programmer's ability to know how they're programming themselves. So how much of human intervention is deliberate and pushing this forward? How much of it is deep learning and technology developing itself outside of the remit of human understanding? And with those two elements, where's it going? Now, we know that there's a let's say an elite aspect of transhumanism who really want to push this, and I refer to them as the immortals. They want to live forever. They want to upload their consciousness into machinic architecture. I'm wondering, what are they afraid of? Because maybe they don't want to die because they know that something's waiting for them and they're not keen on meeting it. So the best thing you can do is terraform a planet, get a machinic architecture, make sure that you can upload your consciousness forever, and that's your domain, kind of, tongue-in-cheek way, but, maybe not so tongue-in-cheek. So the elites that are driving the technology, what is it that they're really aiming for? We can't be sure because, they're not announcing it. But what if there's a certain force or intelligence, which is, we think that humans are nudging and steering humans. What if we humans are being nudged to go in a direction that we think we're choosing for ourselves?
Yeah.
That's the question we should be asking ourselves.
I would agree. I mean, even by the definition, of what you mentioned of the bots learning from our conversation, it seemed to me it needs to be something else, because even then they're behind the curve, right? Because you and I are coming up with something first and then they're catching up. But it doesn't seem to be the case, right? It seems to be something is coming first and nudging us, or trying to, attempting to nudge us, as you say, in a terraforming sense of reality. And like, who are these elites? I mean, I've met a few, I have to say. I've met some politicians, and I've met a few people that to me seem, let's just say, not like us. They have a different feeling to me. And so have you come to any understanding yourself of what that might be?
Well, again, if we take it back to the fundamentals, everything is frequency. And Tesla, not the car maker, but the inventor, Nikola Tesla, said, if you want to learn about the secrets of the universe, think in terms of vibration, frequency, and energy.
Mm.
And so going back to what we said about physicality being a secondary manifestation, energy being the primary, energy is a frequency. And so if everything has its vibratory signature, and so terraforming is also forming a frequency field, and certain elements and certain life and certain physical manifestations have to attune to that frequency field. Now, then it may be that at this kind of potential transition point, humanity needs a different frequency on this planet to go forward. And it may be that there are cosmic events happening now that are naturally changing the frequencies throughout the cosmos. That's being talked about. That's we have cosmic phenomena all the time, explosions and gamma rays and supernovas, micronovas. These are changing the frequency of the cosmos, like an engine. The cosmos is full of engines going off. Now, what if you wanted to change the frequency on this planet? A frequency that's not amenable so much to human development, but is more amenable to, again, a certain technology. Then the technology would want to create forms and structures and systems that operates through a certain frequency. And it may want to get us to go along with it. So maybe we're being nudged. Now, I said to you a few minutes ago that just this week I came across this story of John Titor, which I hadn't known about, and got me more interested in how the possibilities of timelines. Now, what if an algorithm had known my view in history, knew that, wanted to put that in front of me because it came up on a video that I wasn't looking for? What if it put that up in front of me because it wanted me to watch it, and I watched it, and I was being nudged to watch it? And now we're talking about timelines. Now, any kind of a tech person or a startup tech person could get some idea, something put in front of him deliberately, and then encouraged, and certain factors in their life fall in place to make them study or develop a certain technology. So maybe we can say, was that person operating through their own intuition and their own volition, or unknown to them, had they been nudged by other forces, put it into their pathway? We don't know. This is part of the game, the illusion, and that's why we are within these different levels of illusions. And the only recourse we have is greater self-awareness to try to discern when we're playing and when we're being played.
It's a good way to put it. I mean, I have found, even living in Asia for so long, and I recall a story of when they used to ask Japanese people years ago, where they thought, obviously Western people would point to their heads, where their thinking comes from. Mm-hmm. And ancient Japanese people used to point to their hara, to their center. They go, I do my thinking here. Mm-hmm. Right? How would you isn't that, to me, that's kind of blown my mind, even in interacting on a regular basis with Asian people. And they don't think the way Western people do. I mean, I'll have conversations, with people I know, with family members now, with friends, and I'm still blown away, even a few days ago, on the perspective they have on life, as you said, being raised in a different, environment, Melu, religious background, social mores and what have you, that it's even, and you could say they're modern Japanese people or modern Western people, but even they have a very, very different perspective on how life is and how things develop. I mean, to me, I find that fascinating in relation to what you've said in how we can even come to understand what freedom is and what freedom means.
And also a Western characteristic is that we've been very much individualized. Now, I don't mean individualization, where that's a kind of a psychological term, where the individualized is that we've been, especially through so-called modernity and post-modernity, that we've been led to believe that we are, it's good to be individuals, we have our rights, and basically individuals means consumers, and we're told to do your thing and keep up with the Joneses or competition and be better, strive. So this this individual kind of pathway makes us very isolated. And I think one of the Western trademarks or aspects in more modern life is that we've become very, very isolated, as opposed to, let's say, in Central Asia and Eastern countries, they still retain a much more kind of communal sense of community and family and these patterns, whereby in the West, we leave home when we're 16 or 18 because we think I have to leave home because I don't want to be dependent on my parents, and it's part of the conditioning, but it splits us up and it fractures and fragments us. And we see that in society now, that there's a breakdown of social alliances, and that fragmentation and kind of individualism also reflects in our mind. It separates our minds thinking, our hemispheres, so we go from less from an integral perspective, an integral kind of mindscape, to a much more, let's say, left brain one, or the rational one, because that supports and pushes forward this individual kind of competition pathway. So, and also now that makes it much more easy to be manipulated and managed because we're on our own. We get targeted by our customized digital environments. We easily swayed. So we're on our own, but we don't realize that our opinions are generally mass-minded opinions. But because we feel individual, we think that they're our own private property, our own opinions, our own thought patterns. So it's been very clever that we are a mass-minded society in the West, but we don't see that. That's part of the illusion because we feel that we are individuals.
It's a great way to put it. I never quite considered it that way, but it's true. I mean, it kind of explains why, having grown up in Canada, I would see fights pretty much every weekend in one form or another. And having been, in Japan for 10 years, I haven't seen a single fight, anywhere with anybody. And it really does explain what you've mentioned, the difference in the feelings when I go. It seems much more, let's say, confrontational, the West, to me. When I've gone there and you land and you go, oh, suddenly it feels, more violent. I guess that's the best way I'll put it. And you come back to Asia and it feels more peaceful. Right. So I've had that opportunity to develop, and you've given me a new perspective on what you just shared, to how they get tricked, to being told you're an individual and you're unique. And on the other hand, you're still being, downloading everyone else's perspective to have a unified vision of, I'll say dystopia, but other people could have other opinions.
Yeah, it's like we put blinders on us, and so this conditioning is put up the blinders on us, so we're always looking down this narrow way ahead, and so we only see our path, and so therefore we think that we're being courageous and individual, and all this thing about the American dream and all associated kind of ideology, is based on that we can make it no matter who we are, and that. But if you've got the guts and the balls to race through society and walk on the back of other people, rather than standing on the shoulders of giants, i.e., recognizing that everyone that's come before us helped us to get where we are. Now the ideology is to push people down and climb on their backs to get to where we want to be. And so we have these blinkers on us, which again, shields us from the understanding that actually, we're being tricked into absorbing a mass-mindedness. But because there's not really a relational energy between people, we don't really get the opportunity to kind of share and realize it. It's happening now more with more decentralized communications. But I think in social circumstances in the West, we're not that relational. Walk down any high street, people don't want to look at you for fear that someone's going to think you're, wanting a fight, confrontational. You look at the floor. So we don't have relational environments. And we see, we see that now with these, it's easy to manipulate the left and the right, in society. You believe that. What you do is that you get the saboteur to bring them both together and, job done. And because we're so isolated and fragmented and fractured in our social alliances, we're much more easily manipulated to confront each other.
Well, I'd like to take this conversation one more direction then before maybe we put it to conclusion, is like, how would people alleviate that challenge that you just mentioned? Separate, fractured, weaker by, divide and conquer, so to speak. What would you suggest to people listening on how to, especially those in the West, which are still the majority of our viewers, how they can, get over that challenge that might be an internal one,
Mm.
being forced from the external world.
Well, really, like everything, it comes down to a matter of awareness. I think now we're in a better place than we were even 2 years ago, because a lot of people are being more aware that we're being played on this polarity game. And I think, before people, a lot more people bought into the idea that these polarities were genuine. In politics, you had a so-called thing called democracy, where you had the left, and the right, and they were both very, very separate, fighting for their own ideals. And it wasn't so easily visible that behind the left and right was the same puppeteers, And I think one of the advantages of the last couple of years, because although it's been very disruptive, it's been much more visible. The puppeteers had to come out of the shadows a little bit more to unfold their agenda, and because of that, they're more visible. And so people are saying, we thought the left were liberals, for example, but we're now aware that they're probably worse than anybody against free speech, censorship, and and all these things we thought were about freedom. So we're realizing that a polarity now is a false polarity. And I think the more that we're aware of that, the more we realize that we're being played. So if we realize we're being played, your first reaction is like, I don't want to be the victim of these people playing me. I feel kind of like stupid because I've been played. It's okay to feel that. Your first sense of waking up is, I feel so dumb.
Yeah.
Don't be so hard on yourself. All humans started dumb, but we can get to a place of awareness. And so if you realize you're being played, once that clicks, and that chip turns, you start to see it more. It's like the idea of a perception set. Perception set means that when you start to acknowledge a set, it exists, you perceive it more. For example, if you're thinking, I want to buy this car, this new car, once you start thinking about it, you see the same model of car all the time. Whereas before, maybe you wasn't so aware of it. Because you've now put it into your perception, you pick it up more. That's the way that our cognition works. So if you say most things in social, cultural institutions work on polarities, put that into your perception chip, then you start to recognize it more easily. And once you recognize more easily, you realize that this facade of our social, cultural institutions are playing us. And then you say, no, I'm taking my ball home. I'm not playing on your ballpark.
Yep. Good way to put it. Great way to put it. Well, Kingsley, perhaps we've come to a natural conclusion in our conversation with a beautiful solution at the end here. So I'm wondering, is there anything you'd like to leave our viewers with? Is there anything you'd like to share? I'd be delighted to have you back on any number of the topics we've touched base upon, which could go deeper into, of course, in other conversations.
Well, Lorenzo, it's been a pleasure. It's our first conversation, but I've enjoyed very much your questions. I would say if any of your viewers found our chat useful, please let you know. And if they want us to continue, say so, and I'll come back. And I would just say to everybody, it's awareness is critical. Be kind to yourself. Remember to be joyful as well, and have a good laugh in life, because life isn't always dark or serious. The human being is a wonderful, resilient, joyful creature, and yeah, be kind to yourself, but start to be more aware and observant. And I'll be happy to have a chat with you down the road in the future.
Yep, for sure. Everyone here, newagora.ca, you'll find lots of Dennis's, Kingsley L. Dennis's. The cognitive switch in your name is always, when I type it out, has confused me a few times. And of course, we'll leave links to Kingsley's channel below. And I will also link to his YouTube channel, which I've just come across recently too. And Kingsley, if you want to share anything else, please, send it to me after we're off, and I'm happy to put it down. And for your books, please support him. I know he's got several books out there, and you can purchase them through your website, I'm assuming, as well.
Not the books, the website yet. Unfortunately, I don't have a pay window. I have over 60 essays on my website that are all free to read and download. So please have a browse on that. My books are available in different different stores, mostly online stores, because brick and mortar bookshops don't really stock what I write, or what we'll probably be interested in because of the distribution controlling that. But have a browse and feel free, learn more. Drop me a line if you wish to. I was happy to chat, and thanks for giving me this opportunity, Lorenzo, to connect with you and your viewers.
Yeah, it's been a genuine pleasure getting to meet you, Kingsley. I will leave your links below. If anyone has anything they want us to chat about, please comment, like, and subscribe. I'm happy to pass messages along to Kingsley, and we'd be delighted to see you again very, very soon. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. Kingsley, thank you so much. Genuine pleasure.
Likewise. Cheers.
Can't make me lie to my heart. No one tells me where I should start. Freedom first is what I say.